The first sound wasn't the wind. It was the soft clatter of tin, that hollow ring a man recognizes when something alive moves where it shouldn't. Cale Ryder set his coffee down slow, the fire behind him low and steady. The night outside was clear, moonlight dragging long shadows across the dry yard. He reached for his hat, then for the rifle that leaned by the door, another rustle. A cough, small, weak. He stepped out onto the porch, boots pressing into the dust. From the side of the barn came a shuffle, a faint whisper, then the quick scrape of metal. He rounded the corner fast, and there they were, a woman, clothes torn at the hem, shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Two children crouched beside her, one boy, one girl, digging through his scrap barrel with their bare hands. The smell of old beans and ash filled the air. Cale froze. The moon caught their faces just enough to show the truth. Not thieves.
"Just hungry," the woman gasped when she saw him.
Her first instinct was to pull the kids behind her, like a mother fox shielding her kits.
"We'll go,"
she said, voice cracked and low.
"Didn't mean—"
He raised a hand, stopping her words midair. "Guess I've got guests for dinner," he said quietly. She blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. The boy stopped moving, a crust of bread still in his fist. The little girl looked between them, eyes too big for her small, hollow face. Cale leaned the rifle against the barn wall, then nodded toward the house. "Ain't much, but it's warm," the woman hesitated. He could see the shame in her stance, the way her back tried to stay straight even when her knees trembled. She didn't want pity. He respected that. "Name's Cale," he said, trying to sound casual. "You don't have to tell me yours. Just bring the kids." Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee gone bitter. He stoked the stove, dropped in a log, and found half a loaf of bread from the morning. The boy's eyes followed every movement. The girl kept glancing at the door, as if someone might drag them back out into the cold. Cale poured water into the kettle. "Ain't much of a cook," he muttered, "but I can manage something better than the trash." The woman said nothing. She sat close to the wall, hands clasped in her lap, shoulders drawn in tight. Her face was still young but carved with exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from years, but from losing too much too soon. When the kettle hissed, he poured 3 cups of warm water and slid them across the table. "Got some beans left from last night. Not fancy, but fills the stomach." The boy nodded. "Thank you, sir." That small voice hit harder than Cale expected. It had been a long time since anyone called him sir. He watched them eat. Not like beggars, like people remembering what it felt like to have a meal. The woman broke her bread into pieces for the kids before touching her own plate. Cale looked away, pretending to check the stove. He didn't want them to see the lump rising in his throat. Outside, a coyote howled across the flats. The fire popped once, throwing a spark that died in the shadows. Cale finally spoke. "You can stay the night." The woman lifted her eyes, wary. "Only the night," she said. He nodded slowly. "Sure, but I got a feeling one night's not going to be enough." He stood and poured himself another cup of coffee, pretending not to see the way the little girl smiled for the first time. The moonlight stretched across the floorboards, and for the first time in years, Cale Ryder's cabin didn't feel empty. Not anymore. By morning, the wind had settled. Only the smell of last night's fire lingered. Wood smoke, coffee, and something faintly sweet from the biscuits Cale had burned halfway through. He woke to the quiet sound of dishes clinking. For a second, he thought it was a memory, the kind that fades before you can place it. But when he opened his eyes, she was there, the widow, moving slow, careful, barefoot on his plank floor. The children still slept near the hearth under a borrowed blanket. She was washing his tin plates like she'd done it all her life. He rubbed his face and sat up. "You don't have to do that." She didn't turn. "I know, but idle hands make me nervous." Her voice was steadier than last night. Different in daylight, less fear, more pride. The morning sun slipped through the single window, catching her hair where the chestnut strands turned gold. Cale looked away, feeling too awake for a man who'd barely slept. He poured himself a cup of the leftover coffee, bitter and thick. "Ain't much here to be nervous about," he said. She half smiled. "You live alone, don't you?" He grunted. "Guess that's obvious." Outside, a horse snorted from the corral. The boy stirred, mumbling something about biscuits. The little girl tucked closer to her mother. "Evelyn, that was her name." He'd learned it somewhere between the silence and the beans last night. Turned, checking on them. There was a softness in the gesture that made Cale's chest tighten. He tried to shake it off. "You all plan on going somewhere?" Her shoulders stiffened. "We were headed west. Heard there was work near the river camps. But the train stopped taking folks who can't pay." He nodded slowly. "That figures." The quiet stretched between them like a rope drawn too tight. He'd never been good with talk, especially the kind that mattered. Finally, she said, "We'll be gone by noon." Cale looked toward the window. The sky was gray again, rain clouds building over the ridge. "Storm's coming." She wiped her hands on her skirt. "We've walked through worse." He studied her face. Strong jaw, tired eyes. The kind of tired that doesn't rest even when it sleeps. "You got a stubborn streak." She raised an eyebrow. "And you don't?" He couldn't help a short laugh. "Fair enough." The rain started before noon, thin and steady, tapping on the roof like a clock ticking down a decision neither of them wanted to make. The children sat at the table, drawing lines in the dust with their fingers. Evelyn stood near the door, shawl pulled close. "We'll just wait it out under the awning," she said. Cale folded his arms. "You step outside in that, you'll come back sick. I got a dry loft. Ain't fancy, but it don't leak." She hesitated, eyes flicking toward him, weighing pride against practicality. "You offering charity?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am. Call it a trade. You keep the place from falling apart. I get a reason to cook more than beans." For the first time, her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "That's a poor bargain, Mr. Ryder." "Best kind," he said. She looked down, as if embarrassed by the warmth in his tone. "All right, then. Just till the storm passes." By dusk, the rain deepened. Thunder rolled low across the valley. Cale fixed the lantern while Evelyn helped the children settle near the fire again. The cabin glowed in amber light. Soft, quiet, the kind that makes the world outside disappear. When he finally sat, she spoke without looking up. "You don't talk much, do you?" He smirked. "Not unless someone makes me." Her eyes met his across the firelight. Two strangers who weren't strangers anymore. Outside, the rain whispered across the roof. Inside, something else began to settle. Trust, small and silent, like a seed taking root in dry ground. The storm passed sometime before dawn, leaving the earth soft and breathing again. When Cale stepped outside, the air smelled of wet sage and iron, that clean, heavy scent that comes only after hard rain. He ran a hand through his damp hair, glancing toward the barn. Smoke from the chimney drifted straight, a sign the wind had finally died. The world felt still for once. Too still. Inside the cabin, the soft shuffle of footsteps told him the widow was already awake. Evelyn had a way of moving like she didn't want to disturb the quiet. And maybe that's what Cale liked most about her. She didn't fill the space with talk. She filled it with calm. He leaned in the doorway, watching as she poured warm water into a bowl, gently washing the dirt from her daughter's face. The boy, Tommy, sat nearby, trying to tie a bit of string into something that might pass for a toy horse. "You're up early," Cale said. Evelyn smiled faintly without turning. "You don't keep much sugar around, Mr. Ryder. Thought I'd make coffee worth drinking." He grinned. "Now that's ambition." She looked over her shoulder, one brow raised. "You sound like a man who's forgotten what decent coffee tastes like." He chuckled. "Probably have." The sound startled even him. It had been a long while since laughter found its way into this cabin. By the time the sun crept higher, the three of them had filled the place with quiet motion. Evelyn drying the children's clothes by the fire, the kids giggling softly as they chased a moth near the window, Cale pretending not to notice how natural it all felt. It shouldn't have felt that way. He'd told himself he was just giving them shelter, that once the storm cleared, they'd move on. But every time he looked at those small boots drying by the hearth, or saw Evelyn braid her daughter's hair with that soft patience only mothers possess, something inside him shifted. When she caught him watching, she didn't blush or look away. She just said, "You don't talk much, but you watch plenty." He tilted his hat back. "Old habit. Living alone does that to a man." "Maybe," she said. "But it's hard to tell if you're guarding something or protecting it." Her words hung there. More truth than he wanted to face. Later that day, Evelyn insisted on helping in the barn. She shoveled hay with strong, steady movements, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. Cale tried to tell her she didn't need to, but she shot him that same look she'd given the storm. Calm. Unyielding. "I can pull my weight," she said simply. He watched her work, the way the sun lit the edge of her hair, and wondered if she had any idea what she was mending in him without meaning to. When evening came, the kids slept early. The lantern flickered low, throwing amber waves across the wooden walls. Evelyn sat by the table sewing a tear in her son's coat. Cale sat across from her, cleaning his old revolver, not because it needed it, but because he didn't know what else to do with his hands. After a while, she spoke softly. "You ever lose someone, Mr. Ryder?" He kept his eyes on the revolver. "Yeah, someone close?" He nodded once. "Close enough that I stopped talking about it." She looked back to the coat, needle flashing in the lamplight. "Then maybe it's time to start." He didn't answer. Couldn't, but he noticed how the room felt warmer than the fire could account for. When she finished sewing, she blew out the lamp and whispered, "Good night." Cale sat a while longer, listening to the soft breathing of the children, the gentle rhythm of rain dripping from the eaves. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. By mid-spring, the valley had turned the color of gold dust and sage. The rains were gone, the ground dry enough to crack under a horse's weight. For the first time in months, laughter drifted from Cale Ryder's cabin, small, gentle, like a sound that didn't know it had been missing. Evelyn hung washed clothes on the line while the children chased each other through the yard, their bare feet kicking up powdery trails. Cale watched from the porch, coffee cup in hand, his face half hidden under the brim of his hat. He'd stopped trying to count how many mornings had looked like this. It wasn't supposed to last. He'd told himself that more than once. But somewhere between the first shared breakfast and the sound of the boys' laughter, it had started to feel like it might. Then the wagon came. A thin column of dust rose on the horizon before the sound reached them, wheels creaking, metal clanking. When it stopped by the gate, a voice called out, sharp as a whip. "Ryder!" Cale turned. It was Reverend Hale, the town's self-appointed keeper of decency, with two men from the feed store sitting beside him, arms crossed like deputies. Evelyn froze. Hands still clutching a damp sheet, Hale climbed down, his black coat gathering dust at the hem. "Heard you've been harboring company out here." Cale's jaw tightened. Didn't realize hospitality was a sin. The Reverend's eyes flicked toward Evelyn, then to the children. "A widow and two young ones out here?" "Folks talk, Ryder. You know that." The words fell heavy in the air. Evelyn's shoulders straightened, but her voice stayed calm. "We've done nothing wrong, sir." Hale gave a tight smile. "Maybe not, but right and wrong don't always matter when tongues start wagging. Best you move along before they do." Cale stepped forward. "You rode all this way to tell her to leave?" "Not me," Hale said. "The town." The wind picked up just then, lifting the edge of Evelyn's shawl. She looked from the Reverend to Cale, her eyes full of something that wasn't fear, just the quiet understanding that this moment had been waiting for them since the first night she'd stayed. Cale's fists clenched. He wanted to shout, to tell them she was more decent than anyone in that gossip-filled town, but the words stuck. Years of solitude had taught him silence. Now it betrayed him. Hale tipped his hat, smug. "You're a good man, Ryder. Don't ruin your name over pity." They left in a swirl of dust and judgment. For a long time after, no one spoke. The only sound was the flap of the wet laundry in the wind. That night, Evelyn sat by the window while Cale fixed the lantern. The children slept early, unaware of the world sharpening its knives. "They'll never see me as anything but a burden," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "They don't know you," she shook her head. "They don't need to. They just see where I came from." He turned then, meeting her eyes. "Then they're fools," she smiled sadly. "Maybe, but fools can still make a woman's life small." He didn't know what to say to that. The silence stretched until she rose and pulled her shawl tighter. "We'll go tomorrow, before they come back." He stood, voice low. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," she whispered. "You've done enough. I won't have you pay for my presence." Her words cut deep. Not angry, just final. When she opened the door, the wind pushed in a breath of cold dust. The lantern flickered once, like it knew the moment was breaking. Cale wanted to stop her, to say something, anything. But pride and pain have the same taste, and both held his tongue. The door closed softly behind her, and the only thing left was the hollow sound of the wind carrying her name into the dark. The days that followed were quiet, but not the peaceful kind. Cale Ryder's cabin stood empty again, the way it had before she came. The table held only one plate now. The children's laughter had been replaced by the creak of wind through the shutters. He tried to keep busy. Men like him always did. Fixed the fence, oiled the saddle, rode into town for feed he didn't need. But everywhere he went, he saw them. The boy's curious eyes, the little girl's smile when she tasted warm bread, Evelyn's calm voice, steady even when the world wasn't. When he rode through Red Hollow, he caught the whispers. Ryder took in that widow. Guess he sent her off when folks started talking. He didn't argue. Words couldn't mend what pride had already broken. It was near dusk, a week later, when the storm rolled in from the west. Hard rain, black clouds swallowing the ridge. Cale was out by the creek line when he saw a wagon stuck in the mud, wheels half buried. At first he thought it was just a traveler caught in the weather. But then he saw the small figure beside it, a boy, waving both arms. "Mr. Ryder." He froze. The voice was unmistakable. Cale spurred his horse forward, mud splashing high against his boots. When he reached them, Evelyn was trying to free the wheel, soaked through, hands raw from the rope. The girl was crying softly inside the wagon. "Storm caught us," she said breathlessly. Bridge washed out. "We tried to make camp." Cale was off the horse before she could finish. "You should have come back sooner. I wasn't planning to come back at all." Her voice cracked. Not from pride this time. From exhaustion. He reached for the wagon rail, lifting it just enough for her to pull the wheel free. The mud gave with a wet groan. The wagon lurched forward. "Get the kids inside," he said. "You can yell at me later." They rode hard through the rain, thunder chasing them all the way home. His home, though neither dared to say it aloud. When they reached the cabin, Evelyn hesitated at the threshold, dripping water onto the porch. Cale held the door open, eyes soft under the lamplight. "Don't stand there like a stranger," he said quietly. "Fire's still warm." Inside, the air filled with the smell of smoke and bread. He'd been baking again, though he'd never admit it. The children huddled near the stove, hands outstretched to the glow. Evelyn sank into the nearest chair, the weight of weeks catching up all at once. Cale knelt beside her, pouring coffee into a tin cup. "Drink this." She looked at him, rain still clinging to her lashes. "You don't have to do this, Cale." He met her gaze, steady, unflinching. "Yeah, I do." For a moment neither spoke. The wind howled outside, rain drumming against the roof like 1,000 small regrets. Then he said it, voice rough but sure. "I ain't much for talk, but I was wrong to let you walk out that door. You and those kids. You belong somewhere you ain't afraid to be seen. I figure this is as good a place as any." Evelyn's eyes filled, though she tried to hide it with a quiet laugh. "You sure you know what you're saying, Mr. Ryder?" He smiled, faint but real. "I've been sure for days. Took me a while to catch up to my own heart is all." Outside, the thunder began to fade. The storm moved east, leaving behind a clean silver sky. The children dozed near the fire, their small breaths soft against the crackle of wood. Evelyn watched them, then looked back at Cale. "So what now?" she asked. He shrugged. "Now, you get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll build something with more than one bed." Her smile lingered as she turned toward the firelight, its glow touching the edge of her hair. Cale sat back, eyes on the small family he hadn't expected to find in this hard land. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel like a place to hide. It felt like home, and when dawn finally came, the valley shone gold again. The kind of light that makes a man believe the past can stay buried, and love, if you let it, can start new in the dust.